Hey everyone, it's John Little here. Just want to make a short video. And it's been a few weeks since I made a video. Last video I made, I was talking about my recent book, which is an English translation of a 6th century Bible commentary by a Greek early church father by the name of Ecumenius. And it was his commentary that he did on the book of Hebrews. So I translated that, and it's published, and it's available on Amazon, other book distributors, and it's also available for free on my archive.org account. And I'll leave links to the description box below. I am so shadow banned on big tech platforms because I have a past where I talk about the things that the Illuminati, the powers that be, Satan's cult, I talk about the things that they don't want people to know about. And since they have control over just about every institution in the world, they have control over the printing presses, they have control over the internet, they have control over governments. So they've made a point of adjusting the algorithms to where hardly anybody ever finds anything that I post on anything that's big tech platforms, whether it's social media or whether it's YouTube. And I noticed my last video that I did, talking about the commentary by Ecumenius, it only had one view for the longest time. I think it's up to like 3 views now. And actually, I know it had more views because I saw where I had some views, and all of a sudden YouTube took what views I had and just took it down to 1 view. So it's quite ridiculous. It's hard to really say how many views I actually had on there. But that's the uphill battle that I have when it comes to trying to teach people about certain things, whether it's talk about the Bible, whether it's talk about, geopolitics or whatever that, I have on my heart to try to share with people. Big tech platforms just do all they can to suppress my content. And so anyway, just want to talk about that. I got a few things a few questions and a few comments that I had. It's a little bit of dialogue I had with people on YouTube in the comment section. So I want to kind of go over a little bit of that, and I also want to talk about my latest project that I'm working on. I'm working on an English translation of the pastoral epistles, Paul, their Bible commentaries on it. And it's also, again, by Ecumenius, like I said, who is a Greek early church father from the 6th century. I just, so far, of all his commentaries, I've translated his commentary on the book of Hebrews, and also his commentaries on the Catholic epistles, James, 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Jude. I also finished up Philemon, which I've got available for free on Archive. And so right now, I'm just about finished with his commentary on 1 Timothy, and then I'll do 2 Timothy, and then I'll do Titus, and then I will publish those books together and make them available. You can buy it in print, you can buy it in Kindle, and I'll make it for free also on my archive.org account. And I will leave links in the description box below to where people can access my books. But right now, I want to do a little bit of Q&A here. I had some questions asked in some of the comments on YouTube. I took screenshots of it. And but right here, I actually pulling up the comments that I made on a video that was done by Jay Dyer. I do have to hand it to Jay. Jay's very intelligent. He knows a lot about geopolitics. He is a Greek Orthodox Christian, and he's very, very, very dogmatic about that. And so I used to be an Eastern Orthodox. I was an Eastern Orthodox for a couple years, and I became a Christian back in 1996, and I was in my early 20s. I maybe went to church maybe a handful of times back then, prior to becoming a Christian. And but I got initiated into Christianity. I chose to follow Christ back in 1996. and I was initiated into the Southern Baptist denomination of Christianity. And I took it very serious. I was very passionate about it. I studied the Bible hard. I got involved in ministry. I went to a Bible Institute. And, and a lot of stuff I taught myself as well, just through hardcore research. I worked as a chaplain for a while. So, I was a Southern Baptist for 10 years. Then after 10 years, I converted to the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church. And it was the study of the early church fathers that kind of pointed me that direction. At least I felt that God was pointing me to convert to Catholic Church. And once I discovered the early church fathers, like I said, I was a Southern Baptist and started studying, and I realized that their beliefs were, and their understanding of Christianity was significantly different from what I was believing then. And so it transformed the way I viewed the Bible and the Christian faith. So I was a Catholic for 10 years, and I was involved in apologetics. I was defending the faith, and then I had some questions arise. Then I started having trouble with the doctrine of the papacy and a few other little things. And so I was quite troubled by it. And then somebody who was he was a fellow convert himself. He was, in fact, I'll just go ahead and mention his name. I didn't say his name before because I just didn't want him to. I didn't know whether he would approve of that or not. But Michael Lofton is his name. He's got a pretty large channel on YouTube called it. It was called Reason and Theology. I think he's kind of changed the name a little bit. I'm not really sure. I was actually on his podcast a couple of different times, and talking about the Glossa Ordinaria, and also talking about a study Bible that I published called the Early Church Fathers Study Bible. So you can find me on his channel in a couple different interviews. But anyway, he was considering converting from the Catholic Church to Eastern Orthodoxy, and I think he did for a short period of time, and then he went back to Catholicism. But he shared with me, some of the questions he had, and then I became convinced that God wanted me to convert to Eastern Orthodoxy, and so I did. And I was an Eastern Orthodox for a couple years. I wrote about all this stuff in my book called Confessions of a Freethinking Christian, where I write about my entire journey and everything, and all the reasons why. And then actually, yeah, speaking of, I don't want to sound like I'm all over the place here, but speaking of Jay Dyer, years ago I did sell him at least 100 different books from the early church fathers. A lot of them were Bible commentaries by the early church fathers that I collected over the years, and parts of it were collections. And I see when he does his podcast, you can see his bookshelf behind him, and I can see some of the books that I sold him on there. So this was back before, it's been a number of years ago, and it's back before Jay Dyer really started rising in popularity from his podcasts and stuff. And he's done a lot of really good work. But anyway, going back to my journey real quick, just to kind of let you know where I'm at and, the direction of this dialogue, why it went a certain way, is I was a Eastern Orthodox for a couple years, and I was part of the Greek Orthodox Church. And then I hit a point where I was really starting to question everything about Christianity, and started having a lot of doubts. And this is, in my book, I call it, where I was in a point where I call it limbo. Really wasn't sure what direction to go or what to believe for a while. And I started looking into a lot of different things. Really, I just opened my mind and was considered a lot of different stuff. And so, to make a long story short, I did come back to Christianity, but I'm no longer affiliated with any Christian denomination, and I consider myself a free thinker. a free-thinking Christian. In fact, that's the title of my book, Confessions of a Free-Thinking Christian, where, like I said, I wrote about my entire journey from beginning to the present day. And what that means is that I'm not really hardcore dogmatic about most things when it comes to Christianity. I'm open to all possibilities. I'm open to different points of view. And what things that I am dogmatic about are basically when it comes to morality. Because morality is one of those things that it's either, there's not a lot of gray area. There are things that, we should be able to have dialogue about and, come to a conclusion. But I think there's pretty well, it's an either or when it comes to morality. And I think the Bible gives us an excellent, a lot of good stuff that comes straight from God when it comes to morality. And, but most other things that a lot of Christians divide themselves over, there's a lot of people that split up, and unfortunately, it's so bad. The divide and conquer in Christianity is so bad that all kinds of different Christians view other Christians as like their main enemy. It's pretty bad. Everybody pointing fingers at each other and calling each other heretics and schismatics and apostates, and just, they really get angry at each other over the differences and the way that they interpret a lot of different passages of Scripture. And the problem is that these things that they really get mad at each other about are simply the way that they interpret certain parts of the Bible. And when you really think about it, these interpretations, like I said, this doesn't have anything to do with morality. It just it all has to do with like defining doctrines and dogmas and stuff that different groups claim that you either believe the way they do about it, or you're either not a Christian, or or at least they'll call you names like heretics and stuff. And a lot of this stuff, it really, I came to the point in my beliefs, and why I became a free thinker is because there's a lot of things that a lot of different Christians consider binding dogma that, to me, it has just kind of become trivial. And to think that God would send somebody to hell just because they don't believe a certain formula about the Trinity. There's binding dogma that, these different Christians believe that you have to believe about the Trinity. You not only have to believe about the Trinity, but I don't know how many different formulas of the Trinity that Christians have come to different conclusions about. And that's one of the things that divided the Roman Catholic Church from the Eastern Orthodox Church back in the 1000s. It's what was called the schism. And one of the big dividers was what was called the filioque, which is a Latin word, which means of the Son. And in their creed, in the Nicene Creed, the addition, or at least, they blame each other about it. The Eastern Orthodox Church claims that Catholics added the filioque in it, of the Son. And Catholics believe that the Eastern Orthodox omitted it, so they're blaming one another. But that was one of the main things that divided the East and the West, was over that, over a Latin word in the Nicene Creed. And Eastern Orthodox these days are far more dogmatic about that. Catholics tend to be a lot more relaxed about that these days, but not the Eastern Orthodox Church. And they claim that they think that was big enough to divide a whole world of Christianity in half. And that's pretty sad, because, it's not like, one thinks that murder's okay and the other one doesn't. You can see, or rape, to be like a denomination thinking rape's okay, whereas another denomination saying, no, it's not okay. And they divide over that. Yeah, that would be understandable. But to divide over a certain little interpretation, especially to a creed, is pretty sad in my opinion. And that's just one of the millions of examples that you find in Christianity of all the division. And I come to the point where I look at God as, I do believe God is our Father. And when you think about that, I'm a father. I've got a son. He's 28 years old. And when I try to view myself as, and make that allegory, make that comparison, would I want to, as a father, would I want to send my son to burn for eternity just because he, didn't accept a certain word in a creed? And so when I think about God in that sense, would God send his children to burn forever just because they have a little different interpretation? No, absolutely not. And not only is this not coming from God, this is coming from Christian institutions that decide these binding dogmas. And just like at the Council of Nicaea, that was one of the worst, in my opinion, one of the saddest days in Christianity, because first of all, you had a Roman emperor who made that council happen. And he brought all the different bishops together to lay down binding dogmas. And this was, in fact, this is what leads up to the comment that I made to one of the videos that Jay Dyer made, a video that he did fairly recently. The video is called How the Papacy Evolved, and he talked about spiritual authority and everything. And I knew that I would probably trigger him by what I said. I said, the Council of Nicaea was the first major hijacking of Christianity. Clergy and the ruling class defining dogmas after the command of a freaking emperor is extremely corrupt. And the only thing Jay Dyer replied with was he called me a heretic, which I thought was hilarious. And then I replied to Jay. I said, I just put a laughing emoji on there. And I said, we are all heretics, apostates, and schismatics to some people. And that's the truth. We're all heretics. No matter what Christian denomination that you're a part of or Christian institution that you're a part of, you're a heretic to somebody. Like Eastern Orthodox. They're heretics to certain people. In fact, some Christian denominations think they're apostates, that they're from the devil. And so all this little name calling to me is just so petty. If you call me a heretic, that doesn't faze me. It might have fazed me back when I was, part of a certain denomination, back when I was younger and more immature. But since I've grown up and I've matured, these silly little names like that doesn't faze me. And it's just sad. It really is. It's just kind of sad that Christianity's got so much of this problem like this, which shouldn't even be a problem. And here was somebody's reply that actually, was had some intelligence to it. It says, replying to me, he said, "You mean clergy like from the church of that Jesus created?" Of course, Eastern Orthodox think that Eastern Orthodoxy is the one true church that Christ established. Roman Catholic Church believes the same thing. It says, without the Council of Nicaea, the vast majority of Christendom wouldn't even believe Jesus is God right now because of Arianism. Trinitarian Christianity was a small minority viewpoint at the time. Nicaea destroyed that. And I replied, I said, there would definitely be belief in the deity of Christ regardless of Nicaea. What Nicaea did was make it dogma to believe their formulas, which actually just causes division amongst God's people. Instead of being saved by grace, they preach that you are saved by thinking the right formulas they have created. And so I don't think I got a reply on that. Oh, yeah, there's a reply on that. See, the that's when I go back to, with God, is God going to send somebody to hell? Does he want us to divide ourselves over what kind of formula that they cooked up in a council? And it's a shame that Christians can't agree to disagree on interpretations instead of morality. In fact, a lot of institutionalized Christianity is more worried about their interpretations of certain binding dogmas than they are morality. You don't see them arguing about, well, yeah, I mean, they do argue. You got your liberal parts of Christianity, and you got very infiltrated forms of Christianity that are pushing Satan's agendas. That's all part of the problem that we've got in Christianity as well. And yeah, some groups do think it's okay to violate God's moral laws. And but that should be something that Christians should be united to fight against. And if Christians were not divided over petty little formulas and stuff like that were cooked up in these ecumenical councils, then we could actually crush some of these actual real attacks against Christianity and Christians that come from Satan and his minions. And so, but that's to me, that's another huge problem when it comes to these ecumenical councils, that the 7 ecumenical councils were enforced by Roman emperors, by the ruling class. And these ruling class emperors were actually occultist. And, the cult of the dark sun, the Flavians, Constantine was a Flavian. And all he had to do was claim to be a Christian and say he had a vision. And sadly, a lot of Christians and parts of the church went ahead and accepted that and embraced it. And we see that today, even with Christians today. You got all these dark occultist Satanists, these Illuminati minions, like Russell Brand claims to be a Christian now, and he's got the all-seeing eye tattoo. He's been that's what happens is Satanists can say they're Christians these days, and Christians be like, oh, he converted to Christianity. And then they go and buy into everything they say after that. And that's one of the things that Satan and his minions, which, I refer to his minions as the Illuminati, this cult that controls the world, is they've infiltrated Christianity and Christian institutions. They've even created Christian denominations and different Christian sects. They do that through their secret societies like Freemasonry. And there's not only and also intelligence agencies, like the CIA. They've created Christian denominations for spying purposes, espionage, to send in other countries and stuff to spy. That's been something that's happened within the past century. And even, a couple centuries, 2 or 3 centuries in the past, these secret societies have infiltrated. And what the problem is that they've infiltrated and they've institutionalized so much. And the problem with institutions is because these institutions that have a big outreach and influence a lot of things, and they've got a lot of power in the world, all the Illuminati has to do they've got unlimited amounts of money. In fact, they print the money out of thin air through their central banks. They've been able to use money and, by influence, put their agents in high positions of different Christian institutions. And guess what happens? They've hijacked it. They've co-opted it to where they control it. And that's what happened to Christian universities and colleges and institutes in the past couple centuries. is that they've hijacked them. And that's why you have seen Christian institutions, just about every single one of them, pushing satanic and Illuminati agendas. One of the big things that they did very early on, once they started hijacking these institutions, not early on back centuries ago, but I'm talking about within the last 200 or 300 years, is they started pushing moral relativism and rejecting Christian traditions that had good moral foundations. And moral relativism was a death blow to Christianity, because what happened is they started training people who were future clergymen, and teaching them that there's really no such thing as right, really no such thing as wrong. It just all depends on how you feel about it. And that is a cancer. Moral relativism is a cancer that has done more damage in the world within the last 200 or 300 years than almost anything else, because it has changed everybody's points of view about what is right and wrong, where they have come to the conclusion that there's really no such thing as right, there's really no such thing as wrong. And most people really don't have any clue on how much damage that has done. And moral relativism is one of the big tenets of Satanism, because that right there, that's why the Illuminati has gone after Christian institutions. They've gone after and they've pushed moral relativism, is because once they get people to the point to where they're immoral, then they're easier to control. Because when the more that a society is moral, the more free they will be. The more that a society is immoral, the more enslaved they will be. That's just how it is, unfortunately. And that's why they have done everything they can to attack the family unit. They have done everything they can to attack morality. And they've got, and you see where it's led. We do not live in freedom. We live in enslavement. And morality is the key to freedom. And, they've done everything they can through the entertainment industry. They completely control that. Through movies, through music, through television. They have just done everything they can to, and they put all these satanic things in people's heads, and like through the music and stuff, and it really has majorly affected. It has a huge influence on society. Kids grow up with having these immoral things implanted in their heads, and because the strength of a nation, a strength of society, the strongest thing in society is the family unit. And that's why they've done everything they can to attack that. That's what I've written about this in 3 different books. I've written 3 books on the Illuminati. And that was in 1776 when the Bavarian Illuminati was created as a secret society. The people that worked from the shadows commissioned Adam Weishaupt to start the Bavarian Illuminati, and that was for the creation of a new world order. And one of the 6 things that is part of the plank, one of the 6 planks, one of the main parts of the platform of the Illuminati, is the abolition of the family, because that's where the real power is. And look at the state of society now, what kind of shape we're in. And that's because they've managed to pull this off. And they not only do it through your churches, because these seminaries are completely hijacked. And that's why, you can actually, there's been a lot of people that go into, a lot of Christians that decided they wanted to be a minister and to work in the clergy of Christianity, that they go into seminary having a very strong faith in the Christian faith, and they come out with a totally different faith. And sometimes they become atheist, or they're pushing Illuminati agendas, and they have no idea what they're even doing because they learn it in these institutes. And that's the same way with college and everything else. Is you start teaching them certain things at a young age, and it just you've got them then. And it's really hard for anybody to recover after they've had years and years of indoctrination in these institutions. Okay, I took some screenshots and some other things that, some things I thought would be a good, yeah, well, I've already talked about that. Yeah, there's a question somebody asked, I was talking about the New Testament author. I was talking about, actually I commented on another video, Jay Dyer, and somebody asked me if Jude, in the book of Jude, if the author Jude quoted the book of Enoch, and yes he did. He also quoted the book of Enoch, and he also quoted another apocryphal book called The Assumption of Moses. And so, it's especially with the book of Enoch, there were early Christians that thought Enoch was actual scripture canon. And, it just eventually did not be added into the canon of scripture. Doesn't mean it's not valuable. In fact, I think the book of Enoch's very interesting. But yes, Jude did actually quote the book of Enoch. Let's see what we got here. Oh, yeah. There was a video talking about the King James Version, and it was a video that I commented on. The person was a King James onlyist that believed that the only Bible that Christians should use is King James Version, and everything else is from Satan. Yeah, that's a pretty extreme, and in my opinion, it's an absurd position to hold. Now, when it comes to the King James Version, I have no problems with people that use the King James Version. I have no problems when people, if that's the only Bible that they want to use because they trust it and they're afraid to use anything else. But when you get to the point where you start pointing fingers at other people that don't use the King James Version and act like, anything that they use is, if they use another version that it's, satanic, that's pretty ridiculous. The King James Version was a translation that was done back and it was published in 1611. And one of the accusations that I've heard, and this is something to take in consideration, but the accusation is pretty ridiculous when you look at, when you add everything up. But those who are pro-King James Version, and they talk about these modern versions and how Freemasonry has actually impacted these modern versions. Yes, that's something to definitely take into consideration. Because no doubt about it. These secret societies, because the Illuminati, which hijacked Freemasonry back in the 1800s, late 1700s, the Illuminati has managed to buy up and they control all the printing presses. And so things that get published, it has Illuminati fingerprints on it. If it gets approved for that. And so, these big publishing companies putting out these modern translations, you got to take that in consideration. Because, there are some things that are problematic about it. But if you're going to use that argument, you got to also keep in mind that, and some people, I guess, don't really know this, but King James himself, who commissioned to have this, the King James Version, that translation, he was a Freemason. He was a high-level Freemason who actually was a founder of Freemason lodges. And you had Freemasons who were part of the editing process. Somebody like one of the editors, Francis Bacon, was an editor of the King James Version. Big-time hardcore Freemason. Very well known as a Freemason. So that's kind of a weak argument to use if you're going to blame modern translations. And I'm not going to go into that. This video is really long enough. I might make a video. If people want me to make a video talking about the ancient Bible manuscripts and how the King James Version came along and other Bible versions and textual criticism, I'd be more than happy to talk about that. I do have some videos on my channel where I go into some depth about all that kind of stuff. But if people want to hear, some things about that and want me to make a video, just let me know in the comment section. I'd be more than happy to do it. But anyway, again, I'll leave links in the description box below for people to check out my books. You can have free access to all the books I've ever published. And you can also buy my books on Amazon. All you have to do is type my name in the search box on Amazon.com, John Litteral, Litteral, and my published books will come up in print. Except for one book. Amazon actually banned one of my books. It's called the Illuminati Playbook, The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion Unveiled. That definitely is a book where I exposed a lot of things that the powers that be don't want exposed. And the only place you can buy that in print is lulu.com. And if anybody's interested in buying that in print, just let me know. Just put a comment in the section. I'll put a link in there to where you can get that book. But you can actually read that book for free on archive.org. It's the Illuminati Playbook, The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion Unveiled. And it's one of the most important books that I've got. And it's one of the most censored books there are, too. So anyway, folks, I appreciate you all. Take care. Have a good day.